Hey guys, tonight we sail back to the frigid, mud-splattered winter of 1607, where you, yes, you, have just landed in the not-so-glorious New World. Welcome to Jamestown, Virginia, a land of grand promises and even grander disappointments. The breeze smells like wet timber, your boots are already half sunk in freezing muck, and there's a fellow puking over the rail behind you. You're cold, hungry, and somehow still convinced this is better than staying in England. Spoiler, you might rethink that in about 2 hours. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Are you cozy in bed or secretly listening at work? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first impression of Jamestown is brown. Brown trees, brown water, brown sludge beneath your feet. It's technically autumn, but winter is coming fast, and no one prepared you for how different cold feels in this damp, wind-blown swamp of a colony. You shuffle onto the muddy shore, clutching a bundle of supplies that feels both precious and wildly insufficient. A few shirts, a thin blanket, some tools, and an optimistic sense of purpose you'll soon misplace. The moment you land, it's work. There's no welcome party. You're ordered to haul logs, dig trenches, and help build a fort, which looks more like a splintery wooden triangle half sinking into the bog. Food. You get hardtack, rock-solid biscuits that have traveled across the Atlantic, and probably through several generations of rats. Some are soft from mold. Some are crunchy with weevils. You eat them anyway. Your clothes are damp and already chafing. You miss your bed back home, even if it was a flea-bitten straw pile. Here, your bed is a patch of ground under a tarp, next to a guy who snores like a dying bear. You lie awake that night, staring at the stars, wondering if they're the same ones over London. They are. But there's no pub down the road here, only howling wind and a smell like wet wood and old meat. The leaders, if you can call them that, are busy arguing. Captain John Smith is trying to whip people into order while the gentlemen complain they didn't come here to work. One of them brought silverware. Actual silverware. You're starting to realize nobody quite thought this through. The fort is half built, there's not nearly enough food, and the local Powhatan tribes are watching from the tree line. Sometimes they trade, sometimes they just watch. You don't know which is worse. On your second day, your hands are blistered. Your back aches. Your feet are soaked. You try to dry your shoes by the fire, but scorch one of them instead. The other settlers laugh. You laugh too, because the alternative is crying, and you don't want to waste the moisture. A few people are already sick. One guy won't stop coughing. Another hasn't spoken since yesterday. There's no doctor, just a carpenter who's read a book on herbs and thinks garlic is the answer to everything. To be fair, it smells better than most of the camp. Then comes the rain. A cold, slanting, bone-soaking rain that turns every path into a mudslide and every fire into a hissy puddle of smoke. You wrap yourself in your blanket, shiver, and dream of roast beef. When the sun rises, you're too tired to move. But you have to. Because today, you're digging latrine trenches. That's right, you, the aspiring adventurer, are now in charge of poop logistics. By the end of the first week, you realize survival here isn't about strength or skill. It's about stubbornness. The weather will wear you down, the food will insult your dignity, and your fellow settlers, half of whom are either clueless or already losing their minds, are your only company. But you're still here. And in Jamestown, that counts for something. Your second week in Jamestown begins with a new assignment, guarding the chicken coop. Never mind that there are only 3 chickens left, and one of them walks with a limp. It's important, you're told, because someone has been stealing eggs. You don't say anything, but you know it was probably you. Or at least, you thought about it. Last night, your dinner was a spoonful of cornmeal mush and something called salt beef that might actually be salted bark. You would have sold your socks for a warm egg. So, there you stand, watching over chickens in a freezing fog, holding a spear that's really just a sharpened stick. Your breath fogs in the air. Somewhere in the trees, you hear a branch snap, and your heart skips. Is it a deer? A bear? A Powhatan scout? Turns out, it's Thomas. Thomas is 16, always hungry, and very bad at sneaking. He apologizes and swears he wasn't going to eat the eggs raw again. You let him off with a warning. Mostly because you understand. Each day now starts before sunrise. You wake up stiff and damp, teeth chattering. Breakfast is still cornmeal. Sometimes, if you're lucky, there's a scrap of dried fish. Coffee. Don't make yourself laugh. The closest thing to caffeine here is chewing on pine bark. Someone says it helps keep the hunger down. Someone else says that's poisonous. You try it anyway. It tastes like regret. Around the fort, construction continues. You're assigned to help dig a new well because the first one turned out to be too salty. Unfortunately, so is the second. Turns out, Jamestown is surrounded by brackish marshland, not exactly prime real estate for freshwater. The official line is, "We'll figure it out." That's also the unofficial line for most things in Jamestown. You learn a few tricks. How to make a fire when everything's wet. How to keep bugs out of your boots at night, stuff them with grass. How to patch a blister with chewed up plantain leaves. There's a weird sense of pride in surviving each day. But there's also the quiet fear in everyone's eyes that the worst hasn't even started yet. Because winter is still creeping closer. One morning, you wake to find a thin layer of frost on the inside of your blanket. Water in the bucket is frozen solid. Someone tries to light a fire with damp twigs, and it takes almost an hour. People are coughing more now. The man 2 tents down hasn't left his spot in 3 days. Someone quietly digs a hole. No one talks about it. You start to understand why discipline in the colony is so strict. Even minor theft is punished harshly. Not because they enjoy it, but because every stolen morsel might mean someone else doesn't make it. And yes, some people crack. One man tries to run off into the woods. Another hoards food. A third swears the spirits of the land are speaking to him through the trees. Whether that's a fever or just the Jamestown effect, hard to say. Historians still debate how much was mental collapse versus genuine spiritual crisis. There's a rumor going around that the next ship from England is months overdue. That means no new supplies, no new tools, no word from home. You try not to think about it. You focus on the moment. On tying your boots tight, keeping your socks dry, and not losing hope when dinner is just boiled roots and water thickened with flour paste. Despite it all, there are moments of beauty. A sunset over the river. The silent peace of snowfall muffling the camp. Laughter around a fire as someone tells a ridiculous story about chasing a raccoon into a latrine pit. These are the moments that keep you going. Tiny sparks in the cold. And through it all, the chickens survive. You've been assigned night watch now. That means standing alone in the cold, while everyone else huddles beneath their damp furs and dreams of warmer days. You're stationed near the eastern palisade, close enough to the James River to hear the slow groaning of ice breaking along the banks. The moon is full tonight, casting silver light across the crude walls and empty fields. It's beautiful in a way that makes your stomach knot, because beauty out here often means danger is nearby. Night in Jamestown isn't silent. You hear creaks from wooden beams expanding and contracting in the cold. You hear coughs from inside the cabins, harsh, rattling, and more frequent. And sometimes, just sometimes, you hear rustling outside the walls. Could be deer. Could be something worse. You grip your spear tighter and tell yourself it's nothing. Being on watch is a chance to think, which isn't always a good thing. You think about home, about soft beds, real bread, warm baths. You wonder if your name has already faded from your family's prayers, if anyone remembers where you went. You wonder if you'll still remember who you are if this winter keeps dragging on. You wonder how the captain sleeps so soundly with half the fort sick and the other half starving. Every couple of hours, you make rounds with another sentry. Tonight, it's Jonas, the Welsh carpenter who smells faintly of smoke and potatoes. He's missing 2 fingers from a frostbite accident last week, but he still manages to joke about it. Now I've got less to freeze, he says with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. You laugh anyway. That's the rule. Laugh when you can, because silence is worse. During these rounds, you check the livestock, what little is left. The cows have long since been eaten, the pigs vanished, and now it's mostly goats and those eternal chickens. You count them like sacred relics, whispering a prayer each time the head count matches. Occasionally, you peek into the infirmary. It's not a place you want to linger. The air smells of old sweat, spoiled broth, and something worse. Men lie on wooden planks, wrapped in whatever cloths are available. Some shiver violently, others don't move at all. A few mutter nonsense in their sleep. You close the door quietly and step back into the night, the cold air suddenly welcome. You've also noticed something strange. People have started bartering for things that aren't food. A half-broken comb, a strip of ribbon, a bent spoon. It's like people want something to hold on to, something to remind them they're still human. You get it. The hunger is terrible, but the loneliness, that's a different beast. There's one glimmer of hope, the rumor of a relief ship from England. Every few days, someone claims they saw sails on the horizon. Every few days, someone climbs the watchtower at dawn and stares into the mist until their eyes blur. So far, no ship. Just fog, ice, and more waiting. Historians still debate whether some of those supposed sightings were hallucinations, desperation playing tricks on exhausted minds. Back at your post, the wind shifts. You huddle deeper into your cloak and try to remember the warmth of summer. You realize you've started counting the stars, not for any reason, just because they're still there. Unlike some of the men you started this journey with. Your shift ends as the sky begins to pale. You hand off your spear, nod to the next watchman, and trudge back to your sleeping spot, a pile of straw in the corner of a shack with a leaky roof. As you lay down, your bones aching and your stomach hollow, you cling to the smallest comfort of all. You made it through another night. By now, you've developed an intimate relationship with the cold. It's not just something you feel, it's something that presses against you, coils inside your boots, stiffens your fingers, and sneaks under every layer of fabric like an uninvited guest. You've stopped being surprised by how much it hurts. The surprise now is how used to it you've become. That, and how much you miss the feeling of being warm. Not just not cold, but actually deeply warm, like the way fresh bread used to feel in your hands. Today is ration day. Or, more accurately, non-ration day, because there's barely anything left. You're handed a meager portion, a ladle of thin gruel, which might have once brushed against something resembling meat, and a chunk of hardtack that looks like it predates the colony itself. You break a tooth trying to bite it and end up soaking it in gruel like everyone else. No one speaks during meals anymore. There's nothing new to say. The daily hunger is a low growl now, not the sharp pain it was the first few weeks. Your stomach has learned to shrink in on itself like a polite guest overstaying their welcome. You've even begun dreaming about food, roasted chickens, buttery pies, heaps of mashed peas, and waking up angry at your own imagination. To distract yourself, you take on small chores. Repairing a section of the fence. Hauling firewood from the half-frozen pile. Fetching water from the nearest spring, which takes over an hour because the surface keeps freezing solid. At one point, you catch sight of your reflection in the water. The face looking back at you is gaunt, wind-burned, and haunted. You barely recognize yourself. While the fort sleeps, the tension never does. There are whispers about deserters, men who slipped into the woods and never returned. Some say they tried to reach friendly native villages. Others believe they succumbed to wolves, or the cold, or simply lost their minds. One of the captains has started inspecting everyone's bunk every night, just to make sure no one else runs. Cowards starve alone, he says. No one laughs. You've started carving tally marks into the wooden frame of your sleeping quarters. Not for days, no one knows what day it is anymore, but for sunrises survived. This morning, you added your 23rd. That's either a miracle or a slow-motion tragedy, depending on your mood. A new worry has entered the camp. Disease. Some men wake up with swollen gums and loose teeth. Others complain about joint pain, bruises that come out of nowhere. The surgeon says it's scurvy, caused by lack of fresh food. He prescribes boiling pine needles in water for vitamin strength. It tastes like tree bark dipped in bitterness, but you drink it anyway. You're not in a position to be picky. There's also a theory floating around about how chewing leather belts can help fight hunger. You try it. It doesn't. But it keeps your jaw moving, and for a while, that's something. One of your companions, a lanky teen named Walter, shares a secret. He's hidden a small onion beneath the floorboards since October. He says he's saving it for spring. You can't tell if that's optimism or madness, but either way, you make a silent promise not to steal it. Not yet. At night, when the fire has died down and the last embers glow like eyes in the dark, you press your back against the wall and wrap your arms around yourself. You picture your family. Not their voices or faces, but the smell of them, bread dough on your mother's hands, tobacco on your father's coat. It makes your chest ache. The truth is, you're not afraid of dying anymore. You're afraid of disappearing. That all this suffering will go unmarked. That no one will know you were here. Historians still debate how many settlers actually perished that first winter in Jamestown. Some say half. Others claim it was closer to 2/3. The numbers are unclear, but what's painfully obvious is how many were simply forgotten. And so, you vow, quietly to yourself, that if spring ever comes, you'll write it all down. Even if it's just in scratches on wood. You want someone, someday, to know what it was like. The morning arrives with wind that doesn't just push, it punches. You wake up to find a thin crust of frost on your blanket. You've slept with your boots on again, because removing them means risking frostbite. Someone across the room has stopped snoring. That's usually not a good sign. Breakfast is, predictably, disappointment in a bowl. More broth. You think it's broth. It tastes like hope diluted in warm rainwater. But at this point, warm anything is still a luxury. You stare at the wooden cup and joke to yourself, maybe tomorrow they'll invent seasoning. You volunteer to go outside early. Not because you're brave, but because the cabin smells like damp wool, human exhaustion, and last week's boiled turnips. Outside, at least, the air is clean, even if it hurts your teeth when you breathe too hard. Your job today. Shoveling snow off the paths that lead to the latrine pits. It's a task so grim and frozen it feels like a punishment from nature itself. The shovel is half broken, your gloves are more whole than fabric, and for every foot of snow you clear, 2 more seem to fall. But it gives your body something to do besides tremble, and you're grateful for the numb focus. A group of men nearby is working on reinforcing the palisade walls. There's been talk of raids, either from rival colonial powers or from local tribes who are, understandably, displeased with your arrival. Though some accounts describe uneasy trade relationships, others tell of violent clashes. Historians still argue over whether the first conflicts were misunderstandings or inevitabilities. Either way, the fort is on edge. Even now, every time a twig snaps, a dozen heads turn. You're not even sure you'd have the strength to lift your musket if something did attack. Later, you find yourself helping the quartermaster with inventory. It's a fancy way of saying, count how little food we have left. The ledger is mostly crossed out items and scribbled notes about shipments that never arrived. You learn there's exactly half a barrel of salt pork remaining, 2 pounds of beans, and a questionable sack of cornmeal that smells faintly like mold and regret. There's a brief moment of excitement when someone thinks they spotted a deer. Everyone rushes to the edge of the woods, weapons drawn. Turns out it was a tree stump. That's how hungry you are. Trees are starting to look edible. You return to your bunk and find Walter, the onion hoarder, staring at the ceiling. He doesn't say anything for a while. Then he turns to you and mutters, "Do you think they'll send help?" You nod, even though you don't believe it. The last ship left months ago, promising to return before snow. No sails have been seen since. In a strange way, time here has slowed into something syrupy. There are no clocks, no calendars, no real markers except the way your hands feel colder each morning. Days blur. Was it yesterday that Thomas fell into the frozen creek? Or the day before? When you close your eyes, you dream of sunshine and music. You wake up to silence, save for the wind's long sighing breath through the cracks in the wall. But still, you endure. Partly because you have to. Partly because some odd, flickering part of you wants to see what spring looks like in Virginia. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's defiance. You've heard rumors of other settlements that vanished entirely. Lost to famine, illness, or worse. They say Roanoke disappeared without a trace, leaving only a word carved into a tree. You sometimes wonder what message you'd leave, if it came to that. Maybe something funny. Out of snacks, back never. But that's probably the hunger talking. For now, you keep moving. You stack firewood. You patch your coat with scraps. You chew on pine bark just to keep your jaw busy. You joke with Walter about writing a cookbook someday. Title: 100 Ways to Eat Boiled Roots. Night comes again. And again, you count the tally mark before sleep. The next morning, you wake up not to the sound of frost crunching or coughing, but something new, hammering, rhythmic, sharp, purposeful. For a moment, your mind plays tricks on you. Could it be construction? That hopeful word feels like it belongs in a warmer century. But no, it's just the blacksmith. He's repairing a rusted hinge on one of the food crates. A crate that, just to be clear, is still very empty. You roll out of your shared bunk and stretch in slow motion, every joint protesting like you've aged 40 years overnight. It's your turn on water duty, which sounds easy until you realize the nearest water source is frozen over. Again. So you and Walter trek to the stream with a pickaxe and hope. You take turns chipping through the ice until your hands go numb and your eyebrows collect frost like they're auditioning for the role of Winter's mustache. Once back at camp, you pour the water into the communal barrel. It will be boiled later, for safety, of course, but mostly to warm the place up. You can feel the tension all around you. People are quieter today, more withdrawn, as if everyone's silently counting how many meals are left, how many days they can stretch them, and whether their boots will last long enough to find spring. You volunteer next to help with hunting preparations. The hunting party is more of a let's wander into the woods and pray loudly club, but spirits are surprisingly high. One of the younger men, Gregory, swears he saw turkey tracks. Another claims he can smell rabbits. You joke that he's just smelling dirt and desperation, and he laughs. Laughter, there's a rare sound. The woods are eerily still. The trees look like they're waiting for something. You all fan out quietly, stepping through snow that muffles sound yet still manages to crunch beneath every nervous footstep. After an hour, you spot something. Finally, a squirrel. Gregory raises his musket, and you all hold your breath. The shot rings out. The squirrel bolts. You all stand there staring at a hole in the snow like it betrayed you personally. You return to camp with nothing but frostbite and disappointment, but at least the exercise warmed you up. Back inside the palisade, you hear a new rumor. A supply ship might arrive next month. Nobody knows if it's true. One of the elders says he dreamt about it. Another says he read the stars. Historians, to this day, still argue about the frequency and success of supply runs to Jamestown during that first winter. The truth is, the mail service wasn't exactly reliable in 1608. Dinner that night is a stew made from the last of the beans, some bark tea, and something that might be rat meat, but no one is brave enough to ask. You sip it slowly, pretending it's a family recipe from back home. Walter tells a joke about gourmet taverns in London. You pretend to laugh. You miss salt. You clean your bowl with a scrap of bread that crumbles from dryness. Then it's time for evening watch. You draw the short stick. Great. The gate creaks as you lean against it, musket in hand, eyes scanning darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, or maybe that's your stomach. You talk softly to yourself to stay awake. You name the stars. The bright one is Gregory's hope. The slightly dimmer one is definitely Onion Walter. There's even one named after the bean incident. These little rituals keep you sane. Or close enough. You think about writing. You've been keeping a secret journal, tucked behind a floorboard. Nothing fancy, just a charcoal stub and scraps of parchment. You don't know if anyone will ever read it, but maybe one day someone will find it and realize you existed. That you tried. That you didn't give up, even when things got weirdly quiet after dinner and everyone avoided eye contact like they were afraid of who'd be missing by morning. When your shift ends, the sky has softened into gray. Snow starts to fall gently, like ash. You step inside the cabin and hang your coat near the fire. It's not warm, but it's less cold. And right now, that's good enough. You lie down on your straw mat, pulling your thin blanket over your shoulder. Walter's already snoring again, back on duty in his own way. As you drift off, you imagine spring arriving. Buds on trees. Fish in the river. Real bread. Maybe even butter. And a squirrel that doesn't run faster than a bullet. Hope, like frost, has a way of clinging. When you wake the next morning, the air feels different. Not warmer, don't get your hopes up, but heavier. As if the atmosphere itself has gained weight. And that weight smells faintly of something strange. Onions? No, salt pork. You bolt upright. Could it be a miracle? You rush outside, along with half the settlement, to discover the source of this aromatic mystery. And there it is, a small cart pulled by a horse that looks more skeleton than steed, carrying a single barrel and a man too bundled to be identified at first. Turns out it's the messenger from a nearby outpost. No, not a supply ship. But yes, he's carrying food. Or what technically qualifies as food in this situation. Inside the barrel? Pickled cabbage. A whole lot of it. Not quite the feast you were hoping for, but compared to tree bark soup, it might as well be royal banquet fare. People cheer like someone just gave birth to spring itself. You nearly cry. From joy or the smell, it's hard to tell. As a treat, you're given double ration for hauling the barrel inside the fort. That means 2 ladlefuls instead of 1. The cabbage is salty, slimy, and makes your tongue do an unpleasant dance, but it's sustenance. You swear it might be the best thing you've ever eaten. Then you remember that just 3 days ago you gnawed on leather. So, perspective. After breakfast, your captain gathers everyone. Today's mission? Foraging. Again. But this time, you're heading into the marshes, which means muck up to your knees, biting insects, and the possibility of finding wild leeks or, if luck smiles on you, a turtle. You're partnered with Gregory, who's developed a 6th sense for not finding food. You joke that the 2 of you together are a walking famine. The marsh is silent except for the wet squish of each step. It's hard to believe anything lives here. You poke through the reeds with a stick, mostly just to feel useful. Gregory falls into a puddle. He doesn't even swear anymore. That's where you're all at emotionally. But then, miracle number 2, he finds a patch of cattails. You remember someone saying the roots are edible. You pull some up, mud-covered and suspiciously wormy. When you get back, the cook eyes the cattails with disdain but adds them to the stew anyway. Dinner tastes vaguely like potatoes and pond. Not terrible. That evening, conversation around the fire turns to home. You haven't let yourself think of it lately. It feels too far. But tonight, someone hums a tune you remember from your village, and for a moment, your throat tightens. You think of your mother's kitchen, warm bread, the sound of chickens. You'd give anything for a hen right now, even a slightly rude one. Someone asks what you'll do when this winter ends. Eat something not gray, you reply, and the group chuckles. Then you admit it, you want to write. Maybe tell your story. Gregory says he'll open a tavern called the Soggy Boot. Walter says he'll invent a new kind of shovel. No one mocks the dreams. Because dreams, weirdly enough, are part of survival. As the fire dies down, someone tells a ghost story. You half listen, mostly watching the embers. The stars are out tonight, bright and numerous, and you wonder, did settlers in other colonies look up and see the same stars, the same patterns? Historians debate just how interconnected these early groups were. Letters and news moved slow, but word still traveled, sometimes on barrels of pickled cabbage, apparently. You offer to take second watch. The gate creaks as usual. The wind picks up, and you wrap your coat tighter. You start naming stars again. Today's new one, Pickle Mercy. You smile. Still here. Still naming stars. Tomorrow might bring another messenger. Or nothing. That's the gamble of Jamestown. But tonight, you've got a belly that's not empty, boots that are still holding together, and a fire that lasted longer than you expected. In Jamestown, that's not just good. It's legendary. It's the morning after what's now being referred to as the Great Cabbage Day, and you wake up to a new sound. Not footsteps. Not coughing. Not someone loudly regretting life choices. No, this is rhythmic, metallic, and faintly hopeful. You follow the sound across the fort and discover something astounding. Someone is building something. Not just chopping firewood, but actually constructing. Turns out it's Thomas, the settler who used to be a carpenter before deciding Jamestown sounded like a fun career pivot. He's making a sled. For hauling wood and supplies across the icy ground. The settlers gather around like he's inventing the wheel all over again. You offer to help, mostly for the excuse to hold tools again and remember a time when your hands weren't just for scraping frost off your eyebrows. Working on the sled feels strangely therapeutic. The creak of old wood, the resistance of frozen nails, these are familiar sensations, oddly grounding in the chaos. You chat with Thomas while you work, and he tells you he used to make baby cribs. You both pause at that. Nobody here talks about babies. Too delicate a topic in a place where even adults barely hold together. Midday, the captain announces a grim piece of news. One of the storage huts has been broken into. Food is missing. You all glance at each other, calculating who looks shadier than usual. Nobody confesses, of course. The thief is probably someone desperate, someone with a starving child, or someone who just couldn't face one more bowl of cattail stew. You understand it, even if you don't like it. To prevent future thefts, the guards are instructed to rotate shifts and check storage every few hours. You volunteer for night duty again. Why? Because you're developing a weird fondness for the quiet. That, and you're starting to trust the stars more than the people around you. During your patrol, you catch Gregory again, not stealing, just staring at the barrel of cabbage like it's calling to him. You offer him half your ration. He refuses at first, then accepts with the kind of gratitude that doesn't need words. Friendship in Jamestown is strange like that. It's built in half spoons of stew and the silence of shared suffering. Afterward, you return to your post and notice something unusual. Footprints, small, barefoot, and not from any settler you know. You follow them for a while, but they vanish into the treeline. Native scouts, perhaps? The relations with the Powhatan people are tenuous at best. Historians still debate just how much cooperation there actually was, or whether it was more a cycle of mutual suspicion punctuated by awkward trading sessions and bursts of violence. You report the footprints, and the captain furrows his brow. Security tightens again. Another layer of tension slinks over the already brittle nerves of the fort. In the afternoon, someone tries to bake. The bread that results is flatter than a coin and nearly as edible. But the smell of baking, however faint and burnt, is enough to lift morale. You all pretend it tastes fine. Because pretending helps. Pretending keeps your stomach from growling too loudly and your mind from remembering what bread actually used to taste like. That night, it snows again. Quiet, persistent, disrespectful flakes that settle in every gap and crack. You patch the leaks in your roof with cloth scraps and muttered curses. Somehow, it's enough. At some point in the night, you dream about real bread. Warm, crusty, slathered in something yellow and glowing. Maybe butter, maybe just your imagination. You wake up smiling, and that, weirdly, is enough to keep you going through one more day. By now, you've stopped expecting your socks to ever truly dry. You just sort of rotate the least damp pair and call it fashion. Your clothes smell like smoke, salt pork, and existential despair, which, honestly, is pretty on brand for everyone in the fort. But today brings a different kind of tension, not from within, but from without. There are whispers of a scouting party gone missing. You're not technically part of any expedition group, but you know better than to look too available when people start forming volunteer search teams. Still, curiosity wins. You tag along the edge of the assembled group, nodding like you belong, and soon find yourself marching into the woods with 6 others, armed with whatever hasn't rotted or splintered this week. The trees are eerie in winter. Bare branches clatter like bones, and every snapped twig echoes like a cannon. The deeper you go, the more you realize how disorienting the forest is without paths. The missing scouts were last seen heading toward a nearby stream, maybe to trade, maybe to scout game. Or maybe they just wanted to be anywhere else. You find signs, broken branches, footprints half filled with snow, and one abandoned glove. No blood, no signs of struggle. The group splits to search wider, and you trail off with a fellow named Ellis. He's got a nervous habit of whistling under his breath, something between a tune and a prayer. It's annoying, but oddly comforting. Eventually, you stumble upon something unexpected. Not the scouts, but a small cache of traps, snares, fish lines, even a tiny fire pit, cold now but clearly used. Someone's been camping here. Settlers or natives, no one can say for sure. Historians still argue whether such hidden camps were signs of early trade networks or just desperate survival pockets carved out by deserters or friendly locals. Either way, the air feels thick with silence. You don't find the missing scouts. You return to the fort just before dusk, colder, hungrier, and a little more unsettled than when you left. No one's surprised. People just go on with their tasks like another mystery is too much weight to carry right now. That night, the wind picks up hard. The walls of the fort creak. You and others press bundled cloth into the gaps of the plank walls, trying to keep the warmth in. Every corner of the settlement becomes a wind tunnel. The firewood pile dwindles fast. The guards burn green logs that hiss and spit like they resent being used. As if the day weren't bleak enough, a barrel of salted meat goes bad. Spoiled. Ruined. Some say sabotage. Others mutter curses about careless storage. But you've learned that in Jamestown, disaster rarely needs a reason. You're back to soup, mostly hot water and vague hopes. And yet, there's a moment of light. One of the settlers, an older woman with stiff fingers but a sharp tongue, recites part of a play from memory while you huddle around the fire. It's not great acting, but it's more alive than anything else you've seen all day. Laughter flickers through the group like sparks off the hearth. You find yourself smiling for the first time since yesterday. Or the day before. It's hard to tell now. Later that evening, someone pulls out a carved bone die. A crude game starts. No stakes. Just the thrill of pretending there's something to win. You lose, predictably, but you feel a little more human for the effort. As the night deepens, a quiet settles over the camp. Not fear, not even hope, but something stubbornly in between. A kind of agreement, we're not dead yet. And while you might not find missing scouts or bread, or even dry socks anytime soon, you've got just enough resolve to make it through the next morning. You wake to the sharp crack of splitting wood. It's not danger, just Ellis trying to chop frozen logs before the frostbite wins. The axe bounces off the wood more than it bites, and you can hear him cursing under his breath with every swing. You wrap your blanket tighter and pretend you don't see him struggling. That's the Jamestown spirit, compassion wrapped in self-preservation. Breakfast is a suggestion. You gnaw on leftover hardtack that could break a molar, softened only slightly by dipping it into boiled water. Some call it trench toast, though no one laughs. You've started naming the worms you find in the bottom of the barrel before you eat them. It's either gallows humor or early madness. Jury's still out. But today is ration day. Once every few weeks, someone from the leadership tries to enforce some semblance of order, usually with a ledger and a vaguely threatening stick. You line up with the others, trying to act casual while eyeing the dwindling stores. The supplies are brought out with almost ceremonial flair: a barrel of cornmeal, a tin of dried peas, some strips of salt pork, and an onion. A single onion. People whisper like it's gold. You're handed your portion by a man with cold blue eyes and a bad cough. He marks your name in the log even though the ink is mostly frozen. As you take your meager scoop of peas and a slice of pork thinner than your boot leather, you silently calculate, maybe 4 meals if you stretch it. 2 if you share. That afternoon, you're put on watch duty, which means standing half frozen on a makeshift tower of logs and trying not to fall asleep. There are rules. Don't shout unless you see actual danger. Don't abandon your post. And above all, don't imagine warm soup, because your stomach might physically attack you for it. The wind whips through the gaps in your coat. You try to hum to stay awake, but your lips are numb. From this high-up perch, you can see the full outline of the fort, the frozen river beyond, and the brittle forest in the distance. It looks peaceful. It isn't. Halfway through your shift, Ellis clambers up to relieve you. You nod in thanks, too tired for words. He hands you a small handful of dried berries. No explanation, no smile. You nod again and descend. This is what passes for kindness now. Berries, silence, and a moment of not being alone. As evening falls, a new tension stirs. Someone has spotted a shape near the tree line, a figure, maybe 2. It's too far to tell, and no one wants to leave the fort to investigate. The official story is, could be deer. The unofficial consensus is, please let it be deer. The worst thing right now isn't fear, it's the gnawing uncertainty that's been wearing you down like wind on stone. That night, dinner is pea mash. That's the generous term. It's mostly water, with a few greenish peas floating like survivors from a shipwreck. You eat it slowly, trying to fool your stomach into thinking there's more to come. You hear someone say, at least it's hot. Someone else mutters, that's debatable. As people settle into their blankets and corners, one of the older men starts telling a story. Something about a feast back home, with goose fat, bread pudding, and wine. It's the worst kind of torture, but no one stops him. We're all starving for the memory of flavor. Just before you fall asleep, you catch a whiff of something strange. Wood smoke, but not from your own fires. You sit up, sniff again, then lie back down. Could be the wind playing tricks. Could be the start of something worse. Historians still debate how much communication there was between the fort and nearby native settlements during this period. Some records say there was trade, even shared meals. Others claim mistrust and misunderstanding ruled the day. But for you, right now, in this moment, all you know is the cold, the hunger, and the quiet defiance of still breathing. Morning creaks into being with the reluctant groan of frost-hardened timbers and the soft crunch of boots over brittle dirt. You're up before the sun, again, not because you're particularly motivated, but because you're too cold to sleep. Your fingers feel like someone else's. You flex them to make sure they still belong to you. Today, you've been assigned to kitchen duty, or what passes for a kitchen in Jamestown. It's a smoky lean-to with 3 cracked pots and a fire pit that can barely keep itself alive. Still, this is a coveted job. Not for the prestige, of course, but because it means you're close to the food. Or at least close to the memory of it. You spend most of your shift boiling roots. Not potatoes, not carrots, just roots. They look vaguely edible and smell faintly like earth and sadness. A fellow cook named Bennett tells you not to ask what kind they are. Best not to know, he says with a wink, unless you want your appetite to walk off. The stew is mostly water, with an occasional root chunk bobbing around like it's lost. You throw in some dried herbs someone found in their boot lining last week, oregano or mold, no one's sure, and stir the whole thing with a stick that's seen better days. It's edible in the loosest sense of the word. During lunch, you ladle out bowls to the others with an almost priestly reverence. There's something sacred about warm liquid in winter. One man cries when he sees a sliver of onion in his bowl. No one mocks him. If anything, we all feel it. As you work, you overhear talk of rats. Not the kind in the storerooms, that's old news, but new ones. Bigger. Aggressive. Apparently, they're making homes under the floorboards and have started stealing food. Someone claims they dragged off a tin spoon in the night. Another swears he saw one standing on its hind legs like it was planning something. You laugh, but not too hard. At this point, the rats might be better organized than you are. Later, a minor panic breaks out when a barrel of salted meat goes missing. At first, everyone suspects theft. But then someone remembers, that barrel had holes in the bottom. Water seeped in and spoiled it. The whole thing had to be dumped. There's a tense silence afterward. No yelling. Just that kind of quiet that feels louder than a scream. It takes you a second to realize you're grinding your teeth. You decide to take a break and sit by the fire. A younger soldier joins you, barely more than a boy, really. He tells you he used to be a baker's apprentice back home. I'd give anything for a crust of burnt bread, he sighs. You nod, even though you never liked burnt bread. The conversation turns to when, or if, supplies from England might arrive. Some say spring. Others mutter, next year if we're lucky. No one mentions what happens if they never come. It's an unwritten rule. That evening, a small miracle occurs. One of the older settlers has managed to trap a squirrel. It's barely bigger than your hand, but it's something. The meat is shared between 6 people, roasted until it's more bone than anything else. Still, it's the first fresh meat in weeks, and the smell alone lifts spirits for a few minutes. You chew your portion slowly, eyes closed, pretending it's something grander. A venison roast. A spit-roasted goose. You even let yourself imagine mashed turnips. And for a moment, it almost works. That night, curled back in your corner of the shelter, you catch Bennett whispering something to himself. At first, you think it's a prayer. Then you realize, it's a recipe. He's listing ingredients out loud, reciting the steps for an apple tart, down to the folding of the crust. It's the saddest thing you've ever heard. And the most beautiful. You fall asleep to the sound of wind in the beams and Bennett quietly muttering, brush with egg yolk. Bake until golden. History books still argue whether the food shortage was due to poor planning, crop failure, or the sheer absurdity of trying to grow English vegetables in Virginia soil. Honestly, it's probably all of the above. But in your bones, you know the truth. You eat what you can, you share when you're able, and you hold tight to the memory of flavor like it's your last thread to being human. The next morning, the world outside is white, though not with snow. It's frost, thick and sparkling on every plank, leaf, and patch of dirt like nature tried to frost a cake with shards of glass. You nearly slip just stepping outside. Your breath curls in the air, and your nose stings like it's being pinched by invisible fingers. Today, you're on firewood duty. Again. Which is a cruel joke because there are almost no trees left near the fort. You and 2 others grab your dull hatchets and head into the thinning woods, boots crunching over frozen ground. There's a weird silence in the forest, a kind of breath-holding hush that makes every snapped twig sound like thunder. Finding good wood is like treasure hunting with a blindfold. Some trees are too young, others too wet. You do find a few fallen branches, but they're half frozen and heavy. By the time you haul them back, your arms are jelly, and your hands are too numb to feel your fingers. But hey, warmth is warmth, even if it's bought with shoulder pain. You notice something new today, a smell in the air. Not wood smoke or frost. Something sharper. Meat. Someone's cooking something, and it's not roots or squirrel. You follow your nose to a pot boiling in one of the smaller lean-tos. An old man named Giles is stirring it like he's guarding a treasure. What is it? You ask. He grins with more gums than teeth. Shoelace stew. You blink. Come again. Giles lifts a piece from the pot. Sure enough, it's a strip of leather, boiled until soft, seasoned with garlic and hope. Boiled it 3 times, he says proudly. Tastes almost like jerky if you close your eyes. You don't ask if it's sanitary. At this point, taste beats safety. Meanwhile, inside the fort, tensions are rising. People are starting to hoard. A sack of oats goes missing. A man is caught hiding dried peas under his cot. One woman cries over a stolen turnip, and no one thinks that's weird. You're asked to help inspect everyone's belongings. You hate it. You feel like a traitor. But you do it anyway because that's how order survives. You find nothing in the first few shelters. In the third, you discover a stash of acorns tucked into a boot. The man insists they're for his pet squirrel. No one laughs. That night, a small council is held around the fire. The leaders argue over how to ration the dwindling flour. One suggests mixing it with sawdust. Another with ground bark. A third says just eat it raw and save the firewood. No one has a better idea. There's a moment of dark humor when someone jokes, "At least we've still got each other." Everyone laughs a little too hard, then gets quiet too fast. Later, you sit under the stars, staring up at the winter sky. You think of the world beyond Jamestown, the warm kitchens of London, the food stalls of Amsterdam, the vineyards of France. Your stomach growls in protest at the memory. Behind you, someone is humming. A lullaby, you think. A song about spring. You don't know the words, but you hum along. Anything to pretend, just for a minute, that warmth still exists somewhere. Historians still debate whether the Jamestown settlers' worst enemy was the weather, poor logistics, or their own desperation. You'd argue it was silence, the silence of hunger, of hopes shrinking one ration at a time, of friendships eroding with every missed meal. But you also know this: somehow, you're still here. You wake to the sound of something creaking, slow, rhythmic, and too regular to be the wind. You squint toward the source and realize it's someone pacing the wall walk of the fort, over and over, boots scuffing on frozen planks. Restlessness has become its own disease. Some people stare blankly into space for hours, others walk in loops, muttering to themselves like the rhythm might keep their minds from unraveling. Today, you're tasked with checking the barrels. The food stores are nearly depleted, but there's still hope something edible is hiding at the bottom of a barrel, forgotten by time or mold. You pry open one with half-frozen fingers and find pickled something. It's green. It's slimy. It might have been a cucumber once. Might have been a frog. Either way, it's food. That's how low the bar is now. You bring it back and divide it among 4 people. No one complains. Not even a joke. Just nods of thanks and chewing that's more mechanical than satisfied. Hunger makes you efficient. And then the snow comes. It's not a gentle, storybook snow. It's the kind that feels wet and sharp, and it starts melting the moment it hits your clothing, soaking through threadbare sleeves like icy fingers. It seeps into boots and numbs toes. Fires are harder to keep lit, and even harder to start. Every log has just enough moisture to hiss back at you before giving up entirely. That night, someone proposes cooking their leather belt. Again. You think about it for a minute too long. The next morning, one of the younger settlers, barely more than a kid, tries to desert. Just takes off through the snow, thinking maybe the nearby Powhatan villages might take him in, or maybe there's an uncharted path to warmth just beyond the next ridge. They find him a few hours later, collapsed in a ditch, shoes missing. No one asks why. They just carry him back in silence and wrap him in a shared blanket. He's alive, but barely. You sit near him that night, feeding him mouthfuls of watery broth. He whispers that he dreamed of bread. Actual bread. With butter. You think of your own dreams. They've become mostly food-related too. Roasted chicken. Apples. Warm rice. Even things you didn't used to like now seem luxurious. A lukewarm bowl of porridge sounds like heaven. The older settlers say this winter reminds them of 1609, the starving time. Back then, people resorted to, well, worse than boiled boots. You don't ask questions. You know the stories. Everyone does. Some historians argue the accounts were exaggerated, maybe used to scare future settlers into better preparation. But looking at your own reflection in the water trough, cheeks hollow, eyes sunken, you wonder if the stories weren't dramatic enough. There's talk of reinforcements. A ship is rumored to be coming in the spring. With food. With supplies. With letters from home. You don't let yourself believe it too much. But you keep a small rock in your pocket, smooth and warm from being held so often. A reminder, Stay grounded, stay here. You'll make it. Maybe. If you just last another week. Another day. Another sunrise. Morning comes with a groan from your bones. Your joints creak like the fort gates, and your shoulders ache from another night curled on frozen planks. You unwrap yourself from a scratchy blanket shared with 2 other settlers, one of whom has developed a rattling cough that keeps you all up. You give him your water ration. It's just melted snow now anyway. Outside, the snow has stopped, replaced by a damp fog that clings to your skin like another layer of wet clothing. Visibility is terrible, but the good news is that the air smells less like smoke and more like, well, nothing. Your nose has gone mostly numb. Still, you call it a good day. Your assignment is latrine duty. No glory in that, but it's not hunting, which is even worse. No one's caught anything in days. So you take the shovel and trudge through the muck, dodging patches of frozen waste that crunch under your boots. It's disgusting, but there's a strange comfort in having a job that needs doing. One of the captains passes by and gives you a nod. He doesn't say thanks. He doesn't have to. His boots are cleaner than yours. That's all the thanks you need. Later, you help reinforce one of the palisade walls. There's always something breaking, timber warping in the cold, nails loosening, mud sucking the base logs into the earth. You hammer until your arms go numb, not from the cold this time, but from sheer fatigue. Still, you keep going. Not because anyone's watching, but because standing still makes the cold worse. As you pause for breath, you glance toward the woods. Just for a second. The trees stand like sentinels, silent and tall, and you imagine what's on the other side. Freedom. Warmth. Or more of this. Someone once said Jamestown would be a new Eden. A promised land. You squint at the mud and wonder if maybe they were talking about a different spot on the map. At midday, you gather for food. A pot of stew is bubbling, miraculously. It smells faintly of something meaty. Rumor has it someone traded with the natives, though what was given in return is anyone's guess. A handful of beads? A copper kettle? No one cares. You eat. You don't ask questions. In the quiet that follows, a fellow settler named Elias tells a joke. It's not very good. Something about frozen underpants and a duck. But it makes everyone laugh. Actual, honest-to-goodness laughter. It feels strange, like your face forgot how to make that shape. But it's real. That night, you sleep a little easier. Maybe it's the stew. Maybe it's the laugh. Or maybe it's just exhaustion finally catching up. But as you drift off, you realize you haven't thought about the cold for nearly an hour. Historians debate whether this period was a slow adaptation or a descent into survival madness. Some say the settlers were doomed from the start, that the colony should never have been placed here. Others argue that this winter was the crucible that made Jamestown last. You don't know who's right. You only know you're still here. The wind has picked up again, rattling the boards of your cabin like it's trying to claw its way inside. You wrap yourself in every bit of cloth you own, shirt, cloak, even a burlap sack once used for storing cornmeal, and press your back against the wall. You're not sure if it makes things warmer, or if you're just telling yourself that so you don't panic. Either way, it helps. You've started talking to your boots. Or maybe just at them. They've been falling apart for weeks, but you treat them like old friends, grumbling when they soak through, whispering encouragement as you tie them tighter. Your boots are loyal. They've stuck with you when others haven't. Word around camp is that a supply ship might come soon. Soon is a flexible term in Jamestown. It might mean next week. It might mean spring. It might mean never. But even the possibility puts a spark behind your ribs. The firewood is nearly gone, so you ration it carefully, feeding the flames just enough to stay lit. There's no room for waste. You're burning broken chair legs, a carved beam from the governor's old quarters, anything that isn't nailed down and structurally essential. Once, you would have cared. Now, you just want to make it to morning. In your quieter moments, you wonder what home is like. England feels like another lifetime. You can barely remember the smell of bread fresh from a baker's oven, or the sound of church bells on a Sunday morning. But you remember your mother's hands, always busy, always warm, and that's enough to bring a tightness to your throat. You don't cry. You've learned not to. Tears freeze fast in winter. One of the younger boys, Thomas, fell ill today. He's not talking anymore, just muttering nonsense and shivering violently. A few settlers took him to the corner cabin, the one with the least wind. No one says it, but you all know what that usually means. You give him your last piece of hardtack anyway. It's stale, bitter, and cracked, but it's what you have. They say the cold takes people gently. You fall asleep and simply don't wake up. You hope that's true. There's no room for violence here, not anymore. Just sleep and silence and soft, drifting snow. As night falls, you hear something. Singing. Faint, raspy voices lifting a hymn into the icy dark. You don't know the words, but you hum along. It doesn't warm you, exactly. But it reminds you that you're not entirely alone. Historians argue whether Jamestown's survival was due to luck, resilience, or sheer colonial stubbornness. What they agree on is that without the few who endured this winter, without you, there would be no Jamestown at all. No stories. No legacy. Just a vanished dream, swallowed by cold and time. And yet, you're still here. Against all odds, you've made it this far. You pull your blanket up to your chin and close your eyes. So now, let yourself drift. The fire may be low, but it's still glowing. The wind may howl, but your little corner is quiet. The weight of frost and fatigue presses gently against your chest, not as a burden, but like the hand of an old friend reminding you to rest. You did what you could. You kept going. Through the hunger, the cold, the endless gray of winter days that blended into one long dream. And in that quiet, you finally understand something strange and comforting. Survival isn't loud. It's not glorious. It's not grand. It's just getting through the day. So breathe slowly. The snow outside is soft. The sky above is still. And tonight, you are safe, warm enough, and remembered.